Freedom in video games is exhilarating. The ability to choose your path, have your decisions shape your journey, and tailor your experience to your desires is incredible. But what if you could do even more? Customization in video games is just great, from changing the way you look like RPGs do, or to choosing a select character with ability sets like in fighting games. I don't know, I just felt like that wasn't enough. I needed more. Freedom is like a drug. The more you ask, the more you wish for. Imagine if you could customize everything about your character, from your attack, to your ultimate, to even the special abilities you have. With that big idea in mind, I got to work. By work, of course, I just mean copying other games. After some very difficult gameplay, consulting with friends, and just a bit of ChatGPT later, a list of weapons and modifiers was obtained. I wanted to start off the range weapon strong, so I opted for the easiest weapon, the longbow. The basic movement script was simple enough, and we were off to a running start. As it was the first weapon, I actually had to do some work for this one. Easily enough, the stats were what you'd expect. Damage, range, speed, the usual. However, for the longbow, I had a special feature, where you hold down your mouse to charge up an attack. Basically, when you first press your mouse, a timer is started. Then, when you let go, the time is converted into a ratio of the maximum hold time. This is used to calculate the additional range ahead of the minimum range, meaning the longer you hold, the further your shot travels. Since it was really hard to tell how much you had charged up your attack, I added this little red circle. The longbow may not look like much, but it is consistent. I added ammo as well, because I kind of had to. It's a longbow, not an SMG. This was also simple. Start timer when you're not charging a shot, and reload after that timer. Here's the ammo in action. Now you can't use it like a literal flamethrower. The health system was simple enough, but it really helped me evaluate the damage of the longbow and future weapons. Man, this game development stuff's actually live. I don't get what the fuss is about. I felt it was fit to do both of the bows at the same time, so the crossbow's up next. Let's just, switch over to here, do a little thing known as Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V, change the name, and we're done. Jokes aside, the literal only difference was I changed the min-max range to damage. Then, all I had to do was slightly tweak the whole duration calculation, and pass the value in as damage instead of range, and voila! Let's just test this out real quick. Seems to be working, and that's a wrap. Wait, a bug. Nah, what is this charge shot doing? So what's happening is a bit embarrassing actually. It started charging without first checking if there was any ammo to shoot, so that when the player lets go of the mouse button, there was no ammo, so nothing could be shot, and the charge didn't reset. Simple fix, I just moved the ammo check to encompass firing and charging. Now the crossbow's back in all its glory. That whole system is really coming in handy now. What sort of PvP game doesn't have a sniper that has ridiculously long range and ridiculously high damage? This was just absolutely necessary, no questions asked. However, I wanted this to be a bit more unique, just like the other two. So now the further your bullet travels, the more damage it does. Again, really simple stuff. I just copied the min and max damage parts of the crossbow script, because I'm lazy. Just removed the charging and added a min damage variable to the arrow prefab. Then, I just check if that variable is set, which will only ever be by the railgun. Then, it scales the value similar to how the longbow and crossbow do, by using the distance between the initial position and the current position. I had to buff the health of the dummy, because the railgun is just that OP. As you can see, the range based damage is working just fine. The range percentage actually balances the railgun, as it does absolutely no relevant damage up close, but far away it demolishes the enemy. I can just imagine someone just casually walking around without caring the world and just getting one shot by this monstrosity. The flamethrower on the other hand was a lot of work. I thought if I just made the player have a crazy amount of ammo, it would be good enough. I actually need to stop assuming stuff will be simple. All of the projectiles, and I mean all of them, came out at basically the same time, and that dummy just could not handle all of that. Bro was not just cooked, he was just absolutely smoked. Unload time, now that I think of it, it's actually necessary for weapons like the railgun, but it's better late than never. Copied the reload script for this and just modified it a bit, so that instead of happening when you're doing nothing, it just gets automatically set after an attack. Now the flamethrower works, but it still absolutely shreds the dummy. SMGs haven't been added to the game, but they still find a way to rear their ugly head in. Some necessary reworks were in play. I first nerfed the hell out of the damage and made it pierce as well. After asking my friends, apparently it wasn't a flamethrower without tick damage, so I got back to work, adding a tick function to the health script. Useful for later, Now the flamethrower has tick flame damage, tick duration, and a tick amount. These should get passed along down an information trait from the player to the flame projectile with the enemy's help script. There, I just start a timer and deal tick damage after the tick duration, and then you just repeat that for the amount of ticks. Flames are officially back. Now that they're there, I actually can't see how I forgot to add ticks initially. They just spice up the weapon and make it so much more unique. You already know the dummy is getting another health upgrade just for the flamethrower, and it still shreds. Now you can fight fire with fire to your heart's content. It's time for my favourite concept of the lot, the grenade launcher. I don't know why, there's just something about launching deadly explosives at high velocity that just hooks me. The actual launcher didn't need much code, it's just a copy paste of the railgun minus the damage bonus. Despite that, the bullet couldn't just be the arrow again, so I had to make a new script. The grenade has the usual stats, as well as the radius, an explosion delay, and despair time. Basically, when the grenade has reached max range and it hasn't already started its delay, we start, guess what, another timer. After that we start the explosion. The explosion also triggers on collision. Use an overlap circle all to see all the objects in range and deal damage to them all if they have HP. The visualization is really crude. I just scale the sprite up to the size of the explosion. When I get good at art, I'll fix that, but that's a future me problem. The actual explosion looks alright and it does the job, but there are some problems. Why is there always a problem now? First off, the grenade did a sort of skid when it hit the dummy at an angle, and that just looks so raw. Too late I realised that the instant explode also looked a bit dead. The area control of the empty space one is just gone. Luckily, these are both quick fixes. I just changed the on collision function, so that also starts the timer like the normal max range function, and I changed it to an on trigger. On trigger means the object doesn't actually collide, i.e. have physics and bump around, but still detects collisions if you get my drift. I set the velocity to 0 on collision, to prevent that slide as well. The grenades just sticking to the dummy is just randomly funny to me. Imagine you're a player and you're really low HP, and one of those just sticks to you. You can't do anything at that point. And that explosively ends the range weapons for now. Feels like there should be a Steam achievement or something. It's time to get into the brute force melee. The sword is just the obvious first weapon, there's just no other option. The sword should have been simple enough. It's just an overlap box instead of circle. I wanted the sword to ramp up damage the more players you kill. It just sounded cool. That was also simple. You just check the HP of the enemy you just hit, and if it's lower than 0, then multiply the damage by a multiplier. But of course, just rendering the hitbox led to so much problems. First, the hitbox display just flashed infinitely after one attack. This is because it didn't know when to stop displaying, so I just linked that to the unload timer and added a bool for that. Then, it grew every attack. This is because it was scaling the hitbox based on current size and not its original size, so it was also not hard to solve actually. The last one is the most embarrassing. The hitbox kept shrinking, and this is because of a typo where I was using the player size instead of the hitbox's size. The thing with these bugs is, it's not actually that hard to solve. The actual hard part is just scouring through the code and hunting the error messages down. Eventually, we got it working though. Just look at those dummies getting destroyed. I don't know why, but the way it ramps up from 3 shot to 2 shot to 1 shot is just really satisfying to me. I don't even think I really need to waste my breath on the boots. I'm gonna be frank, they're basically the same as a sword, but they have a shorter hitbox and double the ammo. Their special gimmick is, whenever you get below half health, you get a big speed boost, which goes away when you get back above half health. The idea with this weapon is it's for assassins, where you go in, do a lot of damage, and then run away. Thoroughly easy to test, seeing as the dummies don't do any damage yet, but here's a crude representation of what it will look like. It's time to elegantly rerun all your bows and take mobility to its newest heights. Come join me. I forgot what says next in the script. So anyways, the idea for the size was it does more damage the more enemies it hits, and you get a speed boost after every attack. Already some interesting plays I can think of. The code is mostly copied from the sword with the damage multiplier and everything, but I also added a speed multiplier and duration. When I'm dealing damage, I multiply the damage by the multiplier, to the power of the number of enemies in range. That means if there's 2 enemies in range, the multiplier gets used twice, etc. For the speed, I start a timer and increase the speed, then after a timer, the speed is reset. Basic stuff. I thought I could look cool by speedrunning the code, but that was such a horrible mistake. Note to self, never try and take shortcuts when programming. For the scythe, it just wasn't detecting multiple objects, it was only detecting the first one. Still a quick fix, luckily. The movement with this one is wild. There's so many strategies already. Do I use my ammo for avoiding attack or going in? How should I line up my shot? Definitely the most tactics so far. For the drill, the hitboxes from the scythe came back to haunt me. The intention was initially for the drill to slow the enemies on hit, but when I tried this, it just felt really mid. Maybe because the enemies don't move, so there's nothing to slow. Don't question my thinking, I don't even understand what I'm saying at this point. Of course, the same thing as usual, the hitboxes didn't work for all the enemies. What did I do wrong to anger you over hitbox God? I took way too long scratching my head over this one. I even had to put up a visualizer and I still didn't understand what was wrong. When I figured out what it was, I actually couldn't believe how stupid I was. The mistake was literally one line of code. It was returning from the list check after the player was in the enemies list, instead of continuing to the next iteration. One word was all it took. That's just savage. After some playtesting, I reworked the drill, so now it pulls the enemies in slightly, to make it easier to hit them again. This just felt more fresh and fit in well. Functionally, it's still a slow, as it makes it harder for them to get away, but it seems like the right choice. Now the drill is just a literal black hole. It's actually funny how it just sucks them all in, because right now they're just hopeless and they can't do anything about it. We need an option for those people who just want to let out all their rage, and what better way than crushing your foes with a massive hammer. At this point, I had so much different scripts for different weapons, that I can just piece them together like some sort of Frankenstein to get the code for the hammer. Hammer is the same concept as the drill, but reversed and put on steroids. I mixed this up with a rug on distance ratioing to get a push, and got stronger the closer an enemy got to the player. This is very useful at crowd control. The hitbox was basically the same like to the scythe, and the damage was the same as the sword. This massive code actually worked first try as well, which made my day. The push scaling based on distance is just really satisfying for some reason. I also made everything drag and drop, to make it easier to set up systems in the future. The melee is down, but there's not a single moment to lose. My stamina is running out, and my brain cells are rapidly depleting by the moment. 2 days in, we only have 10 options. Got to change that and get some of these modifiers in, so we're speedrunning this, without consequences this time. Poison was quite a simple one to implement. I just used the tick function I created earlier for the fire, and changed the input values. The hardest part was just ensuring you can't poison the same enemy twice on the same delay. Nothing a timer can solve. Now poison can tick, and slow, and decrease damage. What can't this modifier do? Marked was very similar. A damage multiplier to the health function was all that was really required, and then I copied the same crowd management function from poison to manage the marked counters for all the enemies. This way, you can mark enemies and give them increased damage from all sources for a time period. Vampire required actually 0 brain cells to implement. I have a damage dealt variable for the player, which I'm planning to use later for the ultimates. I literally just check if that has changed, and then increase the HP by a percentage of that change. For the recycle, I wanted it to feel useful in combat. Initially, I was planning to steal a bit of your enemy's ammo after a time interval. It just felt a bit too bland. Then it struck me. What if instead of your base ammo, your max ammo increased? I'd hit the jackpot. What if you increase ammo from killing enemies, like the sword? The idea was set in stone. I quickly copy-pasted the code from the sword with a simple addition and... Have I not learned by now not to copy-paste? Why does this grant the player infinite ammo? The magic of subscribing saved the day. No, not that type of subscribe. I mean subscribing to events. This way, I can retrieve the max ammo of each weapon in the player controller, without too much effort. Just slap on a percentage modifier and the recycle is done. The main reason I added the percentage was just so it fit better with weapons like the flamethrower, and it actually feels like infinite ammo, even though it is balanced. The last modifier, of course, has to be the explosive. We like to end things off here with the bang. That's exactly what me and ChatGPT both thought of. When you kill an enemy and you have this modifier on, they drop a grenade which instantly explodes. This is so simple, I just instantiated a grenade prefab and that was that. Initially it was chaining for some reason, where when I killed one dummy, they all spawned grenades. Turns out this is because I was doing damage to the dummies every single frame. There are a lot of frames in a second. So that was polished and the blast move was done. Obviously this is not the final product. There's still so much that needs to be done, but the game plan for the next Devlog is to get the UI for selected weapons working, and maybe some art or multiplayer, who knows. This project is in the hands of the YouTube algorithm. Right now, there are over 50 different combos, with 10 weapons and 5 modifiers. When I add the ability to look at multiple modifiers and introduce the player customization UI, that number is going to skyrocket. Any advice or suggestions, feel free to leave in the comments. Here's some gameplay of cool combos I have.